I fled from a terrible life, overshadowed by my hysterical sister, the golden child, when my relatives realized it was too late. Making my sister the golden child for my parents destroyed my life as I became the unwelcome member of the family. I am republishing this story as my update cannot be made without it. Except from this caption, it has not changed at all. It is exactly how it was before the entitled parents deleted it. Having come across a similar tale online, I knew I had to share my own. I am posting this Reddit post as it will be my one and only one, and I thought it might somehow help me feel a bit better. Having gone to counseling and finding that talking about this helped, I reasoned why not post it online too. I moved out on my own recently and am 19 this year. About 8 years younger than me, my sister had an unanticipated pregnancy and almost missed term. Since I was never told much, I know little specifics of my mother's challenging second pregnancy nonetheless. Her body suffered so much she was unable to conceive further children following the birth of my sister. That year, my mother was in and out of the hospital constantly. She nearly did not survive the birth. This made her and my father focus on my sister, since she might never have been born. I have felt like the other child in the home ever since then, except when they needed me as a free babysitter. Long term, the degree of partiality my parents shown convinced me they were actually crazy in the mind for not seeing what it was doing to me. It is now rebounding on them. I will explain this here. Beginning with my 12th birthday, my parents insisted on my letting my sister blow out my candles. 3 years old, my sister started to cry when she saw a birthday cake not hers. Though my parents pushed me into it, I wanted not to do it. The moment felt entirely destroyed, but they relit the lamps for me to do it once more following her. The next year, the year after that, and so on and so forth, the same thing happened. They simply continued pushing it until it was standard. On my birthdays, my sister had to bring gifts. I never received any on hers. They only informed me that I am a male and that guys don't have as much concern about it when I inquired why. Though I knew I was young, did they truly believe that was a wise remark? Not rather. On my own birthday, my parents would always pick somewhere my sister would want more than I would. I eventually started to receive none. More like my sister was receiving 2 birthdays a year. Beyond this, my parents spent their whole life centered around my sister. Should I choose to do anything, my sister had to want to do it as well otherwise. It was vetoed unless I could do it by myself. Since my video games didn't seem to disturb me in my room, I learned to just shut myself there. Running in to irritate me would be my sister. I so locked the door for this reason. My parents asked me to take it off, but I freaked out since I was an angry teenage tired of being invaded at any one moment. When I had no clothes on, my sister came racing in more than time, and my parents were offended at me for being nude in my own room. They dropped their protest when I pointed out how ridiculous it was. They permitted me to retain the lock. Due in great part to her daily spoiling and demanding nature, my sister acquired quite the princess mentality. I avoided her as much as I could have. Even if I had to create things to fit time alone, I used every justification I could to avoid dealing with her. I had more personal time when my parents hired a teenage girl babysitter. My sister wouldn't listen to the babysitter, so she resigned. My parents tried to avoid paying her by stating she performed a poor job. The girl got some other people involved, and at last my parents paid her what they owed her. They then engaged another female to routinely watch over things, and this one stayed. Still, my parents made it quite evident that I had to see my sister every day I had free. If at all possible, I made effort to be occupied with my part-time employment. Treating me as her own butler, my sister ordered me around. She even gave me a dumb moniker from which she would not quit using. Just hearing that moniker makes me flush. She would weep and call our parents if I denied her whatever she wanted, and subsequently, I would be in hot water for mistreating her. This caused several large disputes once I stopped yielding. My connection with my parents dropped into almost any words exchanged between us for some time. They had the arrogance to tell other parents, during my high school graduation, that I worked so hard because of them. They were right, but the cause they were thinking of was not the one that had occurred. I worked hard, only biding my time for when I would be free, but my parents behaved as they would have expected. Perhaps they did before my sister was born, but thereafter, her life dominated everything. They hardly asked me about school until parent-teacher meetings arrived. After I graduated with a B and C average, My parents basically took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, though the vacation was meant for me. In July, on my 19th birthday, everything truly bubbled to the surface. Though it was my 19th, it seemed hardly like it was about me at all. Though no, they hosted the party at the local imitation Chuck E. Cheese, the only place like it close by. I hoped to God that we were going to my favorite restaurant for once. Every major accomplishment, including my graduation from high school, was the de facto celebrating site. I did remark that my sister would like it more than I would. Kids half my age were partying all around me, and I was bored with nothing to do except eat lousy pizza and play claw machines and obsolete arcade games for tickets to poorly produced prizes that provided me no delight. My parents came out with a pink cake with white flowers on it when it was time. Indeed, it had my name, but it was quite clearly not a male cake. There just consisted 11 candles. My parents positioned the candles just in front of my sister to blow out. It was at this point that it happened at last. Just now, I experienced a mental flash of all the pent-up rage. I simply started ugly weeping then. A 19-year-old lad, I was bawling in front of the whole family. Everyone was so stunned that time appeared to stop. I stood up, and all the material I'd been saving for the previous 10 years came out like word vomit. The whole family watched this event, and after it was finished, I just strolled outside to sit by the family car. My parents kept the pink cake hidden until it was presented. Hence, several relatives followed me to apologize and explained they knew nothing about the pink cake. It made no difference that they didn't know, I said. They all watched from back off while Little Miss Sunshine dominated my life for 10 years. I had no personal birthdays or festivities, all of them centered around her. They all expected me to simply smile and nod as usual on my largest birthday of life as they presented my sister a cake made especially for her while it wasn't her birthday. Some of them started apologizing, but they claimed all this time I was fine with it since my parents said so. I told them I never approved of it. Every year, my parents pushed it on me until I started to pretend to embrace it. I replied to see where we were and opened out my arms. Does it seem like the venue I wanted to mark my 19th birthday and graduation? Not one person even made a try to defend me all this long. As my sister receives everything, I am simply the other child. Not even one of my buddies could be there. Long ago, my parents stopped allowing me to invite them when they objected about my sister blowing out my candles. With 366 days in a year, was it so terrible to desire one about me instead of her? Rather, I am regarded as the entitled, avaricious brat seeking my own birthday. I just returned to ugly crying then. By now my father arrived outside to shout at me. My mother was sobbing too, hence he became enraged. Since I spoiled her moment, my sister was offended now. Everyone in there believes they are awful parents. I finally started screaming at him, saying they are poor parents, and he ought to know exactly why. Well, the rest of the family came down on him like a pack of wolves following my words. Better late than never, albeit I had never seen anything like that before. Nearly entirely backed right up to the front entrance of the restaurant, my father, then most of the throng, flowed back inside with him, to have it with my mother too. My grandparents stayed with me and apologized for closing their eyes so tightly for so long. Though I'm not sure what was spoken to my parents at the restaurant, it was around half an hour before they returned. When they did, they seemed very demoralized. After sobbing so much my mother was still sniffling, neither of my parents could stare me in the eyes. Not really enough for the audience, they both stammered apologies for what they did, and then volunteered to recreate the party somewhere else. One of my uncles couched his voice somewhat differently, loudly, and my parents said they would never allow my sister blow out my candles ever again. They claimed they wouldn't make any portion of my birthday about her, or provide her anything. Another cough accompanied my parents' apologies for receiving a cake, clearly not meant for me. They just felt as though I wasn't bothered about cake anymore at my age. Oh yeah, that was not the appropriate comment. Furious once more, I screamed at them that my age had nothing bearing on anything. They knew it. They had essentially handed my sister my birthday and had no valid justification for doing so. Then I replied, because it is too late, recreating the party was pointless. They amply shown that I matter nothing to them. They wrecked 10 years of my life till I was 18. Future birthdays with them may I perhaps find exciting. My father became enraged at me for stating it though. He stopped when the whole family started yelling at him. My granddad informed him I'm precisely right, and that there is no way they could reverse the current harm. Since my sister was born, he claimed, my parents were terrible people who favored me like a black sheep and treated me like such. More importantly, they were all terrible personally since they just let it happen too. I am due far more than just an apology. I was owed back off for life. Half the family body blocked her from coming close. My mother broke down once again and tried to approach me while weeping my name and apologizing. I refused to let her anywhere near. I just responded I started to walk away as I cannot stand this anymore. One of my aunts brought me back after chasing me. Multiple family members were cursing and cussing at my parents. They were unhappy about what transpired, but I was so unhappy I couldn't even feel somewhat delighted for any sort of justice following all this time. Where was my sister at the time this was all happening? She was still at the restaurant by herself, savoring dessert and tearing open gifts meant for me. To anybody asking, yes, my parents brought her some cake following my walk out and crying. Though they were called out on it afterward, you would imagine their main concentration at the moment would not be that of doing it. While everyone else cleaned the party, my grandparents persuaded me to cool off and settle into their aging minivan. After being found opening one of my presents, a brand new smartphone she slammed against the wall and destroyed. Since she wasn't permitted to keep it, my sister went on a major outburst. A few months previously, she really received a brand new phone for her birthday. My grandparents let me stay the night over at their place, and I ended up so angry that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again. I still avoided talking to my folks when I got home. My father was as quiet as me, and my mother simply continued sobbing since I wouldn't talk to her. My grandparents persuaded me to accompany them out to supper the next weekend, and when we arrived, I was shocked to see a completely different party waiting for me. My parents were there, and they maintained almost constant "Don't hate us" smiles on their faces virtually all through. There was also a banner bearing my name, and a large chocolate cake adorned with 20 candles. Since I didn't actually receive either this year, they dubbed it my happy belated birthday graduation party. I had to sort of act as though I were glad. Really, one excellent party does not reverse 10 years of partiality, or even start to change it. And where else was my sister? She was seated at the table with her arms folded and her mouth curved since it wasn't all about her as it used to be. And instead of singing happy birthday for me, they just sang happy day. My sister shrieked as soon as I blew out the candles. I mean, a little ear-bleeding loud scream for a small child. Looking more disturbed than ever, my parents had to hurry her out and then bring her back in later. For the rest of the celebration, she discreetly pouted from her seat. Among other things, my sister's new smartphone was taken away. I did still acquire one. What she did at the previous party brought penalties. Still, the smartphone was not everything. The family pitched in overall and bought me a vehicle. Though it was only an old white Honda, the moment I lay eyes on it, I adored it. My grandfather corrected it himself. He knows a thing or two about autos. I was delighted. But my sister obviously wasn't as she screamed another one of those screams. She also began throwing a huge fit and demanded a car too. She had to be taken to the restroom by my mother, and they vanished for some time. My father only returned looking dejected. My sister had essentially destroyed their effort to present a good face to the entire family. Several family members also had severe remarks for my parents over the behavior my sister was displaying. She was, they said, a spoilt royal brat. I clearly started driving the automobile straight away, but just days later my sister really damaged the car by smashing 2 of the side windows and splitting the glass to the extent the car was undrivable. She screamed bloody murder when my parents grabbed her and hauled the hammer away, even though they were able to stop her before she caused any more harm. She attempted to bite them then, particularly my grandparents. Everyone was enraged with my sister, since my grandfather had worked so hard on that automobile, and she destroyed it during a fit. My sister was so spoilt by my grandparents that she could even intellectually understand that I might have something she cannot. Many more family members laid into my folks. They were offended about how my parents were preparing my sister for failure by making her an entitled brat who wants the world to be given to her and is going to have a horrible adult life since they wanted to put their feet down and teach her some respect. Her deeds did not go unpunished, though. Effective with the next academic year, my sister was sent to a boarding school after being grounded for the remainder of the summer. About it too, my mother sobbed like a baby, but my father insisted that it was the best way to begin undoing the harm they had done. Indeed, they admitted they are to blame completely. For them not to was really difficult, as no one allied with them at all. At that institution, my sister is very unhappy. She has been lying practically non-stop, despises the regulations and the outfits. She's not getting away with any of it with cameras almost everywhere these days. She shouted at our parents for putting her in that location, even though they tried to see her a few times. Based on what I know, her academic life till she is 18 may be. My folks did pay to get my automobile fixed. Their auto glass business replaced the windows and windshield, and it appears just as it did before. My grandpa came to me in September and asked whether I would be interested. He got me a job working for a friend, but it was 50 miles away, so I would have to move out of my parents' house unless I liked that commute. Moving was just what I wanted. Still, finding a first apartment was not quite simple. To be accepted for a studio, I had to obtain authorized for a credit card, but I got it, and have been living where I am now since October. Though I seldom see them, my parents keep trying to reach me. I simply feel weird and uneasy anytime we talk. Though I'm not going to forgive them anytime soon, my grandfather has advised that they just want to avoid facing how terribly they failed as parents, and attempting to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves or something like that. I am at last content and far from them. Their current state is empty. They neither have my sister nor me. My sister's boarding school is not cost, hence my parents had to spend more hours at work. I can only image the celebration they had for me or the car repairs. Their work is all they have, left empty house, hostile family, and nothing else. Though I don't enjoy it and seems like great suffering to me, it is the outcome of their own acts after all. Edit. I want to thank each of you for all of your accolades. To me, it truly means a great lot. Although I knew my message was lengthy and a lot to read, I simply wanted to get it out and felt much better afterwards. I observed others labeling this post phony in the comments in several different ways. I lived it. I would be quite dubious reading this and questioning the same things in your position, but I do not blame you. Some parents simply truly are like that. A few others who went experienced similar and even worse circumstances have also gotten in touch. Given all the horrible parents in the planet, is it really all that unbelievable as to what my did? Though I come from one of those close-knit families where we stay together a lot, the whole family going back into the restaurant to have words with my dad seemed like a reach. We do things in groups, and at events it can rather readily morph into an entire group versus one individual. I have witnessed a drunk cousin encircled and then booted from the party to sober in another room as he was acting rather inappropriately. Though I personally dislike collective mentalities, it turned up to save me as my parents were embarrassed beyond words for what they had done. They have essentially turned around, stating that they couldn't even provide a reasonable explanation for why they did what they did to me without appearing like even worse individuals. They are quite attempting to get on my side and have no justification. And even if many of you are applauding my family for their assistance, I am very convinced much of that support came from guilt. Except for 2 years due to COVID, they attended most of those 10 birthdays. Still, in those other 8, they accomplished nothing. They kept silent, but they had negative expressions on their faces that my sister might blow out my candles from. Why is that? My grandfather is a quite scary man. My dad is the son of the family leader. From his good side, he would do all necessary to assist you. From his negative side, the family despises you completely. One of the good reasons I find collective mentalities objectionable. But after my grandfather basically acknowledged they were all guilty for not helping me for years, they all felt ashamed and contributed for the purchase of my automobile. They didn't have to donate much individually to purchase it given so many relatives. When I registered the automobile under my name, I found the receipt for it. They paid $2,500 for it, then added extra for certain components and tires. Personally, my granddad tuned it and replaced the fluids. My grandma scrubbed the inside thoroughly. Though I still wish to keep some distance, I am rather grateful to them all. I need time to sort things out on my own. I most likely want to see my parents once again until Thanksgiving or Christmas. Others have also made really accurate comparisons between my sister and the South Park character Eric Cartman. My parents feed my sister a lot of junk food, so she is overweight. She detests any kind of healthful food. I once observed her lay gummy bears on mashed potatoes. Eating that combo makes my tummy roll around. Her bad nutrition also caused her to spend extended time in the restroom. To fix that, My parents had to buy fiber snacks for her to consume. I dawned to believe they were inexpensive to obtain, the ones that tasted well. Along with being somewhat demanding, my sister enjoys feeling in command. I often locked myself in my room to get away from her, as she ordered me about almost continuously. Her extreme bossiness and control cost her many friends, and my parents would just tell her the other children were simply jealous of her uniqueness. My sister even called herself a princess quite a bit, and the big rage she went through upon not getting her way reminds me of Eric Cartman. My sister isn't a dumb either, so I know. She received a C average in school and seldom strives very hard. She would most certainly be a straight A student if she truly dedicated herself. Edit 2. I apparently have a subreddit ban. Not sure what I did, but I might have made the post too long. Either way, I am unable to respond to comments anymore. I apologize, but I appreciate all of the wonderful comments you have provided here. From my bottom of the heart, thank you everyone. Update to my parents celebrating my sister's 10th birthday 10 years ago. What, a year ago is it? I thought I was done here, so I skipped logging back in for a long time. One day I figured, what the heck, and just returned to find plenty of private messages requesting updates. I will so provide one. Mostly from what my parents and grandparents told me. Everything I'm about to share with you is cobbled together. Thus, keep in mind that I am essentially reporting what I discovered, even if it sounds too absurd. Yes, I am doing great, unfortunately. The same cannot be said of my parents or younger sister. Sometimes following my last article, my sister tried numerous methods to get off boarding school. She tried to just do nothing, when none of her lies and machinations brought her anything, but it didn't work out. She then set off a hunger strike. She declared she would not eat anything till our parents arrived to take her home. While my father had to stand in her way and remind her sister's behavior was their responsibility, my mother almost leaped in the car to go save her baby. The hunger strike of my sister only lasted 2 days before she started eating in the cafeteria. Especially because a physician advised my parents she was not permitted snacks or sweets unless they were nutritious. Unless Little Miss Sunshine, my sister, brought her weight under control and ate meals with appropriate nutrition, she ran the danger of developing diabetes and maybe having her growth slowed down. Not gummy bears on mashed potatoes anymore. Naturally, my sister experimented with bullying the other boarding school girls, but they didn't take her bullshit. She started a fight one day and was set upon by many other females at once. Therefore, she was really seriously battered. They kicked her until a teacher broke them up collectively. Though she was scratched and bruised all over, my sister suffered no major injuries. Indeed, she blamed everyone else but herself. I heard she said the other females should follow her advice exactly. She was rejected by them, as they did not. She had somewhat the tantrum over it, I heard. She had spent so long getting her way with everyone that it would have been psychologically impossible for her to not have what she wanted. My sister was found after my mother regularly slipped junk food to her at the boarding school. Although my mother didn't try to smuggle any more junk food after the jig was up, my parents became quite fighting over it. My sister wants to be a junk food junkie still. She hardly altered in the last year indeed. Are any of you truly shocked? I am not. She's not the center of the world. Hence she is just marginally more accommodating. Her plans to leave boarding school just grew more aggressive. She started self-harming to try to get her way just a few months in there. She somehow obtained a knife in the cafeteria and stood on a table threatening herself with it until they sent her home with sweets. Indeed, she wanted candy as well as to be returned home. She didn't only demand. I did mention in my initial post that I had observed her lay gummy bears on mashed potatoes. The only way our parents could persuade her to eat gummy bears was on meals she disliked. Hence, that was her preferred place to put them. Imagine gummy bears over a salad. It kind of negates the idea of salad, but Mom often carried a bag of gummy bears to the table for us. Even looking at gummy bears makes me remember. Well, as they tried to calm her down, my sister was brought what treats they could scrape up. She finally stumbled and fell off the table. Her left arm, her collarbone, and she suffered a frontal concussion from the next fall shattered. By now, even the boarding school had enough of her and refused to let her go back once she left the hospital. Her attempt at suicide really brought her into a worse situation, a psychiatric facility for children. She was reared into a serious case of narcissism, so she was diagnosed with it and driven into therapy. She cannot leave the ward unless my parents escort her. They have also compelled her to keep to a very rigorous healthy diet and finish her studies from there. One might really call it her personal hell. My mother wanted to visit the ward to get her priceless baby, but she and my father got into a violent argument over it, and she struck him with the closest object she could grab, a bottle on the kitchen counter. The bottle shattered on his face, damaged his cheekbone, and rather severely wound him. He had to be brought to the hospital, while my mother had to be dragged away in the rear of a police cruiser when police were summoned. My mother was forced to face her own strong needs to help my sister and ended up undergoing psychological evaluations and committed for many months herself. Turns out that results from major mental crises my mother experienced throughout her own youth. Nobody else know or will tell me anything more than that. Though there is and continues discussion about possible divorce from my parents, none of them has gone any farther than sleeping in separate bedrooms thus far. Regarding me, however, my 20th birthday was not too recent. At a restaurant my grandparents know I enjoy, they gave me a celebration. My sister came as well as my parents did. She was momentarily granted time off the ward, and I could see the utter resentment in her eyes. She sat there looking exactly like before, mouth curled, and stared at me like she wanted me to be on fire. By then, she had dropped some weight, as she hadn't been permitted junk food for so long, and her diet will continue for some time to come. Though she still couldn't handle not being the center of attention, the junk food for my birthday celebration was really the first she had in a rather long time. She didn't yell this time. I blew out the candles. She started instead to cry ugly. Right now, I could tell you this was simply more of her manipulation. She was only repeatedly weeping and asking why. Although I realized daughter is just 9, keep in mind last year she was 8 and insisted for her own car solely because I was blessed one at 19. Not even a learner S permit till she is 16. My sister had a rage on the floor during my 20th birthday, claiming that she had no pizza, no gifts, no prizes, nothing at all. She then began berating our parents before attempting to bolt from the restaurant. She was essentially attempting in her own twisted manner what I did last year. Though I know my sister, you may argue I'm thinking too much about it. If she believes doing anything would get her way, she will do it. Not before my grandfather visited to chat to them. My parents basically apologized to everyone and then brought my sister home early. Later, I learned some specifics from my grandma. He advised them to best not bring my sister to a party somewhere. Alternatively, give her what she wants, as, without permanent halt, this would never end. My sister was then hauled out kicking and screaming as she had heard everything and understood her outburst didn't work. She returned to the ward the next morning, and that is where she is now. How much more time she will be staying is unknown. Though young, the most obstinate person I have ever seen. She will probably not alter until she hits her lowest point. Until then, she will be confined to a location that does no facilitating of her wants. Not even my parents have tried to assign any guilt to me for the activities of my sister this past year. They have had to come to terms with my zero culpability in this and their raising of my sister to be a narcissist. One other kind of addiction is enabling a narcissist. Based on what I have seen and heard other from narcissism, my sister has not been diagnosed with any kind of mental disorder. From what I know, she is actually smarter than me. She came up with an IQ of around 120. She simply enjoys not applying herself unless there is some benefit for her. She was reared this way, and I suppose years will pass before she recovers. Regarding me, I am doing okay on my own. I have to admit I had to pick up the skills of appropriate budgeting and handling all of my own needs. Though it is not easy to grown up, it is still 1,000 times better than the life I shared with my sister and parents. Someone pointed out that my sister S being in a long-term ward for only narcissism makes no sense. I agree generally that it wouldn't. Should a deeper diagnosis exist, I have been kept away from it. I'm not the parent of my sister, therefore I can tell there are some things they don't tell me. I'm not able to just ask the doctor. Having said that, my sister likewise uses extreme self-destructiveness to try to get her way. Actually, her threatening to leave boarding school using a knife on herself was only one of several such events that transpired. She has come to see she is not a princess since moving into the ward. She still has a mindset, though, to do whatever it takes to get her way. She repeated similar threats of self-harm to my parents if they skipped her fast food after my 20th birthday, then tried to hurt herself after being denied. Her most often used technique is head-on collision with a wall. While my father insisted on reporting this to the ward, My mother objected. For emotional blackmail, my sister had and still does self-harm, but based on what I know, her efforts have gotten less in previous month alone. She also claims that her own physicians mistreat her, although her accounts never line up. Thus, on top of narcissism, I suppose pathological lying might also play a role. And all that data I provided most certainly explains her being in a long-term ward. Most likely Little Miss Sunshine is counting on, if she were home, my parents would gently comply to her requests all over again. Then everything would just return to something as usual. Update 3. Learn some more about Little Miss Sunshine. I am an idiot, first of all. Some of you pointed out flaws in my postings, questioned my assertion that my sister is wiser than me, and all around. In school, I averaged a D and C, hence math was my worst subject. It was noted that I said my sister's age wrong quite a bit. I am to blame for it. Usually I tell people she is 8 years my junior, and when I talk about her, the numbers just seem to merge together. I suppose if I did the arithmetic right on paper this time, my sister's birth in June technically marks me as number 9, and at 3 she first had to blow out my candles. I struggle greatly with arithmetic, hence it doesn't help that I attempt to retain some imprecise or slightly incorrect facts, either to remain anonymous. Looking back though, this isn't exactly quite anonymous, as everyone in my family might read this and identify me. I messed rather poorly. Everything from the time my sister was born focused on her. This is not only some boring, envious elder brother nonsense. My sister might not have blown out my candles until she was 3, but even before that she was also celebrated just as much on my own birthdays in front of everyone, and I became rather bitter. Imagine the birthday boy seated there, his mother merely flaunting a newborn in front of everyone, using the gathering as an opportunity to show off. My parents basically paid me no attention till cake time came. It wasn't too horrible a recollection at the time, as my grandparents made up the difference. They even informed me it was really reasonable, as my mother had struggled with the pregnancy, and my sister had just been born 1 month before. But then that's how things went down on my 10th birthday, and nobody spoke or acted about it. Then on my 11th birthday, my parents essentially followed the same pattern and highlighted all of my sister's infant achievements before anything truly happened for me. Then several of my presents were clear toddler toys meant for my sister solely enjoyment. Though my name was on them, they weren't tea for me. I recall them being dubbed bonus presents. Once more, not one member of the family mentioned or acted about it. Then things really started to go terrible on my 12th birthday. My parents requested Little Miss Sunshine be let blow out her candles. There were gifts bearing my sister's name on them. Everyone saw, and they all did nothing. After that, the birthday locations were always focused on my sister, and occasionally, she was even let assist me to open my gifts too. It wasn't help, they simply wanted me to satisfy her. Now double all of that to my 20th birthday, you will see why I at last lost it on everyone back then. I mentioned that although my birthday was taken over for 10 years, in fact it was more like 12 years. After then, my parents' admission of their mistakes just wasn't enough. Though I am not sure I ever could, I attempt to present myself as one who can forgive them. Someone else noted to me that you cannot be diagnosed as a narcissist until you are 18. I accepted my father's word for it, since I am somewhat naive about this kind of thing, and contacted him this morning to discuss it. First he asked me how I knew, and I answered with Google. He sighed and said my sister exhibited several additional symptoms, as well as probable future NPD, and official diagnosis cannot yet be rendered. They want to tell me what it is, but there is also a great likelihood my mother also has a mental illness. Months ago, my mother was diagnosed with both said condition and PTSD. The PTSD caused from some childhood experiences my mother would not reveal or urge her to confess. Whatever it is rather awful. My father became irate when I inquired why I was given such simple information and white lies. He said he just believed I would let it go, since my sister is their concern and not mine. Then he said they should be the ones worried about my sister. I should concentrate on my future and forget about dealing with Little Miss Sunshine evermore. Sadly, among all he has said to me, this is among the most rational things. Regarding Little Miss Sunshine, her stay in that ward is not really clear-cut in terms of time. But I also asked my father another question, whether my sister had ever mentioned wanting to murder me while there. Someone else pointed me to this. The response was somewhat center ground. Though she mostly blames our parents, My sister did blame me. Her biggest argument with me was her conviction that what was mine should also be hers. She even gets envious since I now possess a flat. That set off further outbursts of wrath and requests for the same things I have. She was let to be at my 20th birthday, as therapy has gradually helped her to calm her anger little by bit over time. Nonetheless, her conduct that day rose all over again. Ever hear a little child utter mind to whatever it comes across? Well, my sister is mind complicated with my birthday is 100 on my parents. My sister did and still feels she deserves my birthday, because that has been the case as long as she could recall. That is the reason she freaked out last year and yelled this year. My birthday has always been hers. In her perspective, my parents have requested me to kindly leave the matter alone. My sister will require a lot of time to be treated. There is no certainty she will ever get better. My mother is in treatment herself. Her own condition is treated today, and she is frequently sluggish from the drugs. She struck my father with a bottle, then found herself momentarily housed in a hospital herself, and somehow kept her job. Though it meant less salary and some sort of relegation, her manager is a very empathetic person and let my mother work from home after returning. Another aspect I would want to address is one I omitted from my discussion in previous post. My birthday this year was not my birth date exactly. Rather, we commemorated the day of the delayed celebration I had last year. This is okay with me, as the real day of my birthday has always been permanently tainted to me. I was born essentially near the end of July. I want to mark this day from now on. The delayed birthday took place 1 week later in August. People also continuously wondering about my situation last-wise. I was doing very nicely, if not exactly great. Though I confess it has been difficult to mature, pay my bills, learn to handle my money and all that, I was good. Then strangely, my returning to Reddit to discuss this has made me worried. What is the phrase, psychologically relapsing? Not sure either. I felt I was all okay, but now I'm always edgy and skeptical. It even caused my manager to send me home early for the day. Though they know my background, I still feel horrible. Coffee this morning set my heart racing. I suppose I will have to look for free therapy or anything else among neighborhood support organizations. After all, I'm on a budget yet. Right now, I'm simply trying to unwind and escape from reality. If I come back here someday, I may find myself anxious like this all over again, and therefore I might not. I appreciate everyone that understood my suffering and perused my postings. Though I really need to pull myself together and get over it, you are decent people. Edit arranging. Reviewing my article, I believe I once more made a mathematical error by 1 digit for my age at sister birth. I didn't really check it and typed the entire thing far too quickly. My manager advised me to take a sick day today. I have been such a mess. Actually, I vomited up this morning from anxiety, and all day I had a pounding headache. Mostly I was resting in bed, in and out of the shower often. I just now am beginning to feel better. I would never have told the world if I had realized how I would feel. More importantly, yesterday night I came over another post created about half a month ago without anybody even mentioning it. Someone chopped up their elder child's cake that their elder child purchased for themselves simply because their own Little Miss Sunshine screamed for a piece. Their parents were just as awful as mine. The eldest kid bought for their own bespoke cake in celebration, and then the parents chose to cut their cake the night before since their golden child, who I believe to be of same age to my sister, sobbed for the cake. I don't blame the OP since she finally called off the party totally. But given that and knowing of similar postings, there are far too many parents out there like mine. Parents who only alter by shame still are the same people deep down. I am planning to see my grandparents to have a chat about the situation. I am going extremely low contact with my parents. I doubt I would want to write here once more or even respond to comments. I really detest opening my email. I might not return. I need a vacation from Reddit.